Today's guest is Hutton Henry, who works at the intersection of people, tech, and mergers and acquisitions. Currently runs a firm that provides technology advisory for investors and founders to help them increase the value of their tech firms. And Hutton's USP and interest in the market is in the psychology of tech teams. So, Hutton, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
I'm really well. Thanks, Jessica. How are you?
I'm doing great. Like I said, I'm excited when we get somebody that has a completely different time zone. I'm like, out of all the things you could be doing, like this is the thing that you want. So I'm always appreciative of that and want to make sure the experience is the best for you. So yeah, why don't you just give us a little bit more context, of who you are and why you do what you do, sort of outside of the bio.
Okay. I mean, I've been in technology since 1986, so it's some time, and I've almost had three portions to my career. But the underlying and underpinning piece is the impact of technology on people. I've really been focused on that. It doesn't mean I'm the best manager in the world. I can see it happen, and and I think I've been a techie since a very young age. So if you take those two aspects and then the M&A piece, that's why I say I work in the intersection. So for the last 7 years, I've been working for investors and I work a bit like a house surveyor. So I come in, assess the business, and I tell them how good it is, but it's not a house, it's a tech asset. And I love it. And it's been interesting because it's been a challenge for me personally to build a business. So yeah, that's pretty much a potted history. It is a lot of technology and a lot of people and and how that all connects.
I love it. I mean, it's such a like it's something you don't really expect when somebody says like they work in tech or whatever, and it's such a cool intersection of like your history, your interests and all of these things like overlapping and aligning to create something that's like seems to be like very unique to you. So any
Yeah.
comments or anything you want to add to that, floor is
But
yours.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you're lucky, you sort of fall in the right position that takes your interests and your passion, and it has a value for the market. And I sort of, with hindsight, feel I'm in this sort of pyramid system, and I'm at the top where I can see I'm not better or above people, but you get to see how companies are bought and the impact on people. And interestingly, I get to see I have a front seat view not only of the founders' journeys but how investors sort of work. And they genuinely are way more focused on people than, say, the newspapers or the movies would make them out. They are very concerned about continuity.
Love it. And I think it also plays to, and I know this goes into like what we were talking about off air, which is like you have this inherent interest around, people and like like everybody would say that, I'm very likable and people like me, etc. And it's like very unique, I think, to you because you need to have a certain disposition to be kind of aware of like what's between the lines when you're talking about people and to merge that with like such a strong tech background, I think is again really cool. So again, anything you
Yeah.
want to add to that, floor is
Yeah, no, it's
yours.
quite interesting because um I- it's odd that I ever took tech on. And actually I'm really into people. As in disc, I'm a pure I. So I'm very outgoing. I really want to, invigorate things and influence. So adding a cerebral part to that is really fun. It's a bit different. You can energize teams and they energize me and I learn from them all the time. So I feel very lucky to have this business. It's quite niche, but it is super fun.
Beautiful. Well, I'd love to then support you because you seem to always be in a position to like support others. So I know off air you had mentioned a lot of these people-pleasing tendencies or avoiding confrontations, etc., management issues tend to be kind of the sticking points for you in your journey right now. So tell me a little bit more about those.
I think, to be fair, that's not just recently. I think it's a long-term thing, and I believe it's quite. And the weird thing about having this front seat, watching investors and founders, they often have similar problems. So you can almost watch that movie on yourself. And in a nutshell, yeah, I'm known to be quite innovative and I'm good fun and I'm a nice person and that's great. But when you're in the business, you need people to respect things and just keep things going. And I found that a struggle because confrontation isn't my natural thing. And I almost get in my own way with that because I'm much better now, but I used to really avoid it and let things really build up. And then that's not really fair on staff members. And I don't think it's fair on anyone really. But the main thing is if it's in your head that you can't confront and you can't set good boundaries and that type of thing, then then really the team doesn't know where it's going. And so I've learned that it's okay to do it, but it doesn't mean it's a natural skill. And I watch some of the people who work with me. I've got some great great team, and they've managed teams, and you can see their memory is so sharp on what was promised, what did we agree, and so that sharpness allows them to confront it in a way where it for me it's a little bit vague. I think at the beginning when we make commitments, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, very energetic, but when it goes wrong, that energy doesn't work.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, there's
Yeah,
an observation where you're saying, okay, so other managers that I work with or team members or
yeah,
whoever, when they agree to a commitment with their team members or whoever,
yeah.
when those commitments don't get met, they are kind of on point to
They're so
actually kind
sharp.
of point that out, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then for you, even though in general you have a very good assessment of everything, you can remember things easily. When it comes to these things, it's almost like kind of like there's blinders. Like it's like, oh, what did we agree on? There's like a discomfort
Yeah,
around it. So to tell me a
yeah.
little bit more about your experience with
Yeah,
that.
or it's like do you know like we have a spidey sense,
Hmm.
and for me, mine doesn't pick up. So it won't pick up. Oh, that person didn't do this thing, so it doesn't shoot into that. So I will make an agreement with you, just going. You say, right, I'll do that in 2 weeks. A week or so in, my brain is working on so many things. I won't remember to think, oh, did they check into that? So there's some measurements. There's some things I can do to avoid that, like put things in the diary, but it isn't a natural skill of mine to do that. I think it has a really big impact because I can't confidently confront because of that.
Got it.
That's one cause. That's only one cause though of that though. I think.
Say that last part again. I didn't really catch that.
I think the lack of memory is only half of the problem. So, and then the other half of the problem is I just don't like confrontation. So you put those together, that is pretty lethal.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. So would you say that the lack of memory shows up in other areas of your work or no?
Um, yeah, I'm really good at client work. It's so everything I can run multiple customer projects and sales engagements and things like that. And there's so many of them ongoing. Um, so my memory sort of relaxes in that. It totally relaxes in code. So software, like it's almost like a photographic memory. And I've always felt that with people management, as much as this is the irony. I love dealing with people and like fixing people issues. I mean, I get paid for doing that, right? But then, um, but then there's that kind of that missing link, and that's interesting.
Got
Um,
it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, no. And sometimes, depending on the type of people I'm working with on a project, they've got that natural skill, so they push it straight away. So you're sending an agreement and they have that sort of detailed brain and and so mine is fast and innovative and like, let's go for this. It's energetic. And then you get someone feeling some of the detail and also remembering what happens, more like a COO type operation, if you like. So
Got it. So it seems to me like this isn't like a memory problem per se, because it would be kind of across the board if you had a memory
yeah,
problem. It's actually like kind of like selective
collective
remembering.
memory.
Like
Yeah.
I will excel in using my brain when it comes to the, technical aspects of things.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, and it seems like it's specific to the upholding of expectations or like the mirroring of this was said, but then this was delivered. That's where there's like a blank in terms of like this memory lapse. Like that. Is that accurate as far as
Yeah.
your experience?
Yeah.
That is. Okay. Perfect. So one of the tricky things with regards to the way that a lot of these defenses work is we will in some ways do behaviors or do certain things that quote unquote self-sabotage, but
Yeah.
look like just kind of happenstance.
Yeah.
And blanking out, like even let's just say if I'm in session with a client and we start to probe into areas that are either like emotional or like places that they don't really want to look at, they'll oftentimes blank out and be like, sorry,
Good.
I don't actually know what it is that you said.
Yeah.
And that's not them being rude and like not listening to what we're doing. It's actually their brain's defenses to basically disassociate when things start to get squirmy.
Yeah.
And the reason that I bring this up is when you're retelling, like, okay, well, this is where this tends to happen, it's not generally dealing with people. It's actually a very specific thing where, like, if I don't remember the thing that this person is supposed to come back at me with, then it's very hard or it's harder to actually get into these uncomfortable confrontational areas where your subconscious doesn't really like to go. So before I go on, what lands for you with that, what doesn't, etc.
Yeah. I think it's the pinnacle of that challenge is the memory and the confrontation. If you take those two things, and I also would say that the way that I will run a team is very trusting. So I'll give you a big remit. We're going to build this, we're going to do this, but I don't really like going into it. Just doesn't, I don't go into a mass amount of detail if I was going to give you a task. So it's also to do with how I was taught how to work when I was a kid, because literally it was like the world's your oyster. Here's a load of like, I mean, then we didn't even have the internet, so it was massive libraries of computer stuff, so you can go and learn what you want. We need this built, let's go. So because I had that freedom and because I loved that, it's kind of what I always try and replicate throughout my whole career. Most people really love it because it's like, it's just like you can build what you want, not just tech, it can be sales, marketing, whatever. Um, so I guess getting to the point, yes, that's the very pinnacle of the challenge. That's when I see it the most acutely.
Mhm.
Um, it's probably in there in little bits, but I don't mind that because it doesn't cause me a problem because most people, most things just get done naturally, really.
Right. And that's more of a kind of like a circumstantial buffer than it is like this one leadership aspect of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that is, okay, if things get done, that just means you're in good, high quality, high performance teams, which is obviously great.
Yeah.
But it's like that could be also masking this, what I call leadership limits and all of these aspects of avoiding confrontation, people pleasing, needing to be liked. They all seep into those. So again, before I go on, what lands for you with that? What does it?
Yeah, I would agree. That I don't have anything against that. So, um, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So when you look at that, like what you call the pinnacle kind of this problem for you, so what's your initial thought of like what's going to happen if you are in conflict?
Uh, well, I mean, the reason I'm smiling is I'm thinking, but there's another challenge in there, right? Which is shiny new things.
Mhm.
So then the shiny new thing will appear, and it's like, well, that's interesting, or there's a new customer or a new thing. So if you haven't got a memory aspect, you've got shiny new things. So I have had to learn over the last 2 or 3 years how focus is a really important thing. So you can see how niche down my business is. It's so like in terms of the tech world, it's really focused. but it took me a long time to get there because I could do everything. It's like, wow, let's do everything, right? So I think that's that. And sorry, what was the question again now? Because I've just sort of,
Yeah. And it was funny. I was actually gonna reflect that back to you because so what I asked you was, okay, well, what do you think is going to happen if you are in
yeah,
confrontation, right? And what your brain defaulted to was giving me this beautifully articulated answer
get away.
around another thing that like you're aware of
Yeah,
about yourself, right? And ironically, we're talking about focus and how it's
yeah,
important to be focused, yet as soon as I shine the mirror onto, okay, well, what happens when I'm in conflict?
yeah.
You see how like this isn't a memory
Oh
issue, this is
yeah,
actually a disassociation avoidance issue. Like you just literally experience what your brain does when it avoids the memory.
yeah,
Okay, so what lands for you with that
yeah,
reflection?
yeah. So I get first with the first thing, then with a conflict, then I've got better, so I can sort of sit with it. But I don't. I've. I think at first I used to get it wrong. That I used to think you have to get angry with that
Hmm.
way, right? Because I just don't get angry. It's just not in my DNA. And but I have to sort of take it in and think it through. In the past, I would rationalize why it happened. So this didn't happen, so I'd rationalize it and then I would avoid the conflict. But
Hmm.
then that would just get worse and worse and worse, right? Um, then now I will take it away and think, what's the best for both? And I think I've definitely come to the conclusion it's better for the whole team and even the people involved that we do get through that hump and that bit of turbulence. If you get through that, then everyone wins. And it sort of causes me to read a lot of books, and look at a lot of characters. But at the end of the day, I have to sit in that problem and I have to explain that. And I literally will now just have a discussion or a call, but it's taken a long time to do that.
Got it. So that's basically again a beautiful description around how you've learned to cope and work around this
Yeah,
natural tendency to avoid conflict.
yeah.
So, and I know I keep asking the same question,
That's
but
fine. Yeah,
it's for a
yeah,
reason, right? So I'm not just trying
yeah.
to be difficult for
Yeah,
entertainment's sake.
yeah, yeah,
Um, because you already know, and we've witnessed these patterns of essentially deflection.
yeah.
What I'm getting at is like, okay, so what are your thoughts? Like, what does it mean to be in conflict? What does it mean about you to be in conflict or confrontation?
Um, I think the first thing is it sort of it I have like a level. I work with people as peers, so suddenly you have to lift yourself away from being a peer to be able to do things. That's one thing. What does it mean for me? It's just uncomfortable. There's no doubt about it. It's not particularly the way I want to work. So I like a joyful environment. Um, and yeah, it's an interesting thing because there's no natural energy coming from me to tell people that that's a problem. I think they know. I mean, you can see it in the results.
Well, you can see it in the results, fine, but also if there's no consequence of those results or in the unmet expectation that that's enabling a totally different standard than I think you actually want. So it's an assumption, and then you can test whether or not that assumption actually works for you. Um, what I think is interesting about what you shared is you said, okay, so if I really take a moment and tune in, well, what does it mean? What does it mean about me to be in confrontation? I'm using confrontation broadly. I think even what you're describing is like just asking if expectations and commitments and agreements have been met, which
Mm.
can be confrontational. It's under the same umbrella, but it doesn't have
No,
to be as intense as like confrontation and
no,
anger, etc. But
no.
regardless,
Yeah,
what came up for you when you tuned that in is that there's this basically like I'm somehow superior if we get into confrontation. I have to be above
yeah.
somebody if I'm in confrontation. So is that accurate as far as your
That's like
experience?
a childlike thing. I don't really want to be out there, but then there's two things in that. which is someone I trust very dearly, and I don't have any problems like that. For the last few years, just says, Hutton, you're the boss, tell me what to do. I don't mind, just but be clear. That's the thing. So that opens the paveway. It gives you like the permission to operate in that way. And one of the things that luckily I have addressed, which was a big problem beforehand, which is in line with what you're talking about there, is I never used to use the word want. Can we? Shall we? It was always like a negotiation and a question mark at the end.
Mhm.
And so like even graduating to that, it's taken me so long to do that. And actually that's much easier because everyone knows where they're going. I really think, I want this, and so so but I can tell you how that was a problem because that will relate, is that I used to see that as demanding. So if
Mm.
you take the demanding thing and being the boss, where you've got to get there. And I remember with my first company, um, I don't have a problem sharing this, but it was really interesting. Is I found it very hard to give myself the top title. And so I was a consultant. I love being a consultant, even to this day, just going in and helping people and making massive change quickly and learning as well. They're really big things, but you never have conflict in those scenarios. And then when I switched over from being a very successful consultant to this, I had been operating as, if you took our org chart, we were all consultants. And it was only when we went to do this really important presentation that this lady from a big vendor said, Hutton, who's the boss here? And I said, it's me. And I said, well, I know that, but these people don't know that. You're going to have to change it to managing director. So I gradually did that. And but I didn't own it. And then the next company, we started to get into the investment world and the CXO things. And it's like, you need to clearly show that this person's a CTO and this person, you are the CEO. There's hesitation there. Did it. Never really owned it. And you'll see I'm a managing partner now for my business. That feels so right for me. It's also right for managing consultants. We don't have that kind of ultimate thing. It's a very much a consultative way of running your business. So I feel at home with the job title, but it's been a very slow journey to accept it. It wasn't like I'm there, I deserve that. Even if I worked hard and got results, it was an ownership thing.
So it seems like you have like it's really fortunate that you seem to be in it, like to put yourself in very good environments where people are actually championing you and fostering this within you and kind of giving you permission. Like you mentioned that this person that I trust, like, no, you're the boss, you tell me.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a fresher breath air for you because it's like, okay, I'm actually allowed to do what it is that I'm here to do. So there's like an air of permission, even though technically doesn't need to be there. So I think that's actually a blessing in disguise for you because it allows you to cope well with a lot of these things. But it seems to me like the root cause behind this never really kind of got addressed. So
Mhm.
again, does that land for you? Does that not land for you?
Yeah, that lands. I know when I feel uncomfortable. It's not as often now, but it's because I think you're right that the environment has changed into a more collaborative working environment. It's the nature of the work is so collaborative. But the very first business was a much more top-down necessity. And so it's quite interesting how that's changed.
Absolutely. So in present day, like right now, is this actually something that is a problem for you, or just kind of one thing that you've learned to like work around?
Um, there's times when I've really addressed it. I think it's still a problem underneath, if I'm upfront. It's it's yeah, yeah, that's as simple as that. It might be great that I've changed the working environment. It's more collegial, it's more professional, it's more cerebral as well. There's so many good things about it. But if I hit it again, I you would the problem would pop up.
Yeah, it's like it's not in your face, but there's still a bit of like fragility in knowing that this is a thing. Like that's kind of what I'm hearing from the
Yeah.
outside in. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So what then in your words is the problem of this?
The problem, what's causing this, or what's in front of me, or
So I mean potentially both, but I guess the context for the question is you were saying, okay, I've found all these ways to cope with this. I'm in an environment right now that is a lot more collaborative. So, this might not be as big of a problem for me as it was before, but I still
yeah.
consider it a problem. So how would you define the actual problem? Because from the outside looking in, like when you're describing everything, like I can see the patterns that are at play. I can see where you would need to go to like heal all of these things. But in general, people don't really care to heal these things unless they're actually causing them a problem.
Oh, I
So
see.
what
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what do you think, in your words, if any, is the problem of these, again, we'll just umbrella term
Or or
people
or do
pleasing
you think,
patterns?
or do you think it's like a manifestation of it, or um? Well, it's sort of it's sort of like I have a very sort of free and open way of working, but I haven't really pulled it in and say, right, we're going here, we're going to scale this, we're going to do that. It's sort of, everyone's quite autonomous, and that's great. Um, and it could have probably, been more dynamic, and delivered more faster internally. Customers won't see that because we deliver everything that's needed, but you could be more innovative. You could deliver more, I think. So that's the other side of what it could be like. What's the problem is, sometimes the autonomy means that you're missing value. Say if we're building a software platform, you're not going to get there as quick as you could do.
Okay, so,
And
and again, I'm just going to reflect back
yeah,
what I'm hearing. You can correct
yeah,
me if I'm
yeah,
wrong, but it just sounds like while the environment is collaborative, it is nice, it is suited to how you generally tend to operate. And I'm not saying this is like people are lazy, but it's like more
yeah,
the intentionality behind, let's just say, growth or speed is a bit more laissez-faire. Like it's a bit more, okay, yeah, like well, like there's none of that directional, whether it's
yeah.
push or even pull
But
towards like
it's
we're going here.
yeah.
Is that accurate?
But, no, but I actually think it's something else, talking with you, to say, if we are building this new innovative thing, when we hit a collision, it goes off in a new direction rather than deal with the collision.
Ah, okay. So we're
Yeah.
not really dealing when, like, it's great when things are going great, but as soon
Yeah.
as things hit like a roadblock or a
And I will
setback,
adapt it. I will, because
okay.
I'm really good at fixing things and adapting them, which has always worked for me. But that doesn't work for a company sort of product or anything.
Right, because it's not just you, it's actually the team. Like you can't be responsible for everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I don't micromanage, and I want people to do other things. But if I talked to one of my team members on Friday, and reflecting on this year, and we are making the product, and we've made a number of pivots, as every software company does, partly to do with the financial, sort of economic side of things. So, the early side of the year. So you have to adapt. And I was doing that to sort of work out, well, where's this going to go? But also, on reflection, it's also trying to absorb the fact that we're not moving as fast earlier in the year. So, and whilst we're over that, we could have avoided that if we just stuck to the one direction.
Okay.
So that
So,
from
yeah, go
me
ahead.
trying to fix the address, trying fixing the system, really.
Sorry, say that last part again.
That comes from me. I'm so quick at addressing things. I won't sit still and say, well, it's your problem. I go, okay, great, let's just do this.
So, are you then like, is your tendency to avoid the confrontation and fixing the setback enabling like too many pivots towards a different thing instead of
It
like isolating
could
and
be
fixing one
on
thing?
reflection, but I think it's been an odd year. So that's been a learning thing that it's okay to say, you know what, we're just going to go with this. It's simpler. It's just the way it is.
Okay. And is that like good or bad for you in terms of the results that you're experiencing?
Um, it's medium at the moment,
It's medium.
but
Okay.
yeah, but it's pretty exciting because we just, we've had a solve, but we'll be honest, I think it's quite normal. I think you probably know about the trough of sorrow. It's a normal startup thing where you go through, you build something, you have results, then you see the challenges, and I definitely see it in the companies I assess. And part of the reason why I'm building software in the background is I want to go on the same journey as the companies we assess again. It's no good for us to come in as people who have done this for years and not be on a modern journey and I'm glad we've done it, right? Because we've been building software and new products and ideas in an economic sort of challenging period of time. And then we've seen what's important to people. So, so we can relate to our customer a lot more by
And
doing that.
and I think that's just a beautiful like reflection of like your values and what you're here to do with regards to like the company that you want to build, the type of relationships you want to have, and like, again, just a reflection of who you are
Mm.
in terms of the values that you bring to the table. So I don't like there's nothing about that stands out as an issue for me. I actually celebrate you for it.
Yeah.
Um, I think going back to looking at how these patterns of leadership for you really show up, it's like what I'm really noticing is it's not a block for you in the typical way where it's like this is so obvious that it's like stopping us from moving forward in these ways. It's actually like this leadership aspect just creates certain inefficiencies that I see going forward, certain leaks that I see going forward that we just kind of have to like skirt around and detour around, but it's not like a major block in the typical sense. So is that something that's accurate for you
That's
as
true.
well?
But then it is true, but it can create more work or more hours, because it's like we're gonna circumvent, we're gonna fix. So the big thing is like don't jump in and fix, which is really interesting because I'll tell that to my clients.
Like you're telling them don't jump in and fix things that your
Yeah.
team's
Yeah.
supposed to fix.
Yeah. Or what I mean, it's not that your team needs to fix them, right? You just need to look at the problem and before fixing, because that's the jump, stay still, right? And let that manifest and feel the pain really, and then sort of take your decisions from there. So it's
Got
really
it.
easy for me to see that in the teams because I work with the team dynamics. As I say, it's the psychology of tech teams. It's a real interest of mine, because it's an area that's not really thought about. Um, and it's an area my heart's close to as well. But the interesting thing is that yeah, that's the thing. Really, it's on that internally, we could do the same. So it's a bit like in consulting, the cobbler's children have no shoes, and it's the similar thing.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's like our the hardest advice to take is usually our own. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah,
I get that, and that's why like I have coaches myself, and I'm a firm believer that coaches also need coaches. So
yeah,
yes, 110%. And I've said this on the podcast many times as well, but it's like that whole idea of like it's really hard to see the building if you're standing on the balcony, right? Like you need somebody that's there that can shine these things your way and be like, oh wait, look, this is actually where you're not being consistent with your word. This is where, your own advice could be applied to you, etc. So yes, I'm also a very
yeah.
big fan of that. So anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, so two things. So I totally agree with you. As far as excited to come on this, and so I think it's really important to have a coach. But but this was a bit unusual as well. It was very directed in specific areas. Um, and it's also made me think that the absolute fear for me is aggression. I don't like it. Yeah, hafty, bad, yeah, aggressive responses. I can't deal with them.
And I guess my reflection back to you, etc. It's like what I'm hearing when you speak about these things, there's like an undertone of like everything's black and white. Like it's kind of
Mhm.
like if I call somebody out on a deadline they say they would have met but didn't, or deliverables they said they would deliver didn't, it's like to me from the outside looking in, like it's not aggressive to simply ask and
Point.
require what's going on. But oftentimes when you've mentioned doing that, there's this air of I don't want to be superior. I don't want to be known as like higher than anybody else. And there's no way that like I want to jump into an aggressive disagreement with somebody. Yet it's like aggression's up here, but like what you're asking to do is down here in terms of like the magnitude of this broad spectrum of confrontation. So what lands for you with that reflection? What does
Well, it's interesting because I notice the aggression now, and I can meet it with less fear. And I'm quite good at reasoning and thinking it through and articulating that I've observed this. I think this has happened, um, and it's making me feel this and whatever. That sort of let's have a human conversation about it. So I'm good at doing that now, but it's a long-term habit. Oops, that's my Siri. Um, but it is you don't break lifetime habits super quickly, but you have to see them, right? As you're saying with the balcony perspective. Um, and I think it's literally, it's really interesting because I can sort of see so many projects I work on that, we get through the problems really quickly. The team's great. It's just in certain circumstances, we're just not moving fast enough, or I get aggression on, different things, on rates or something like that. And it's like, well, it's in the meantime, I might take the hit, or, it's sort of absorb the problem when in fact it was never a problem in the first place. So.
and when you say absorb the problem, you mean like you internalize it as like something that you did wrong, or like what do you mean by that?
So it's like, well, okay, so if something come up and oh shit, excuse my English, if we've hit this problem, and now we've found out that people want this and they want A, not B, or B, not A. My instant and quick reaction is to try and fix that. So that's
Hmm.
absorbing it, right? Where you just have to let it. I mean, everything you do when you breathe and you stop, for a moment, it gets better, right? It's just you learn that over time with stress and everything. But with I think, yeah, I mean that's the main thing I'd say. So
Right. So what I'm hearing is like you again are very good at the coping of these things that come, like the triggers that come up. Like you mentioned the breathing. I can kind of rationalize my way through it. I can be communicative. I can explain things better. I can, through breathing, control my own reaction. Like, is that accurate for you as well?
yeah, and rationalization, understanding why there's so many things that kick in at once,
Yeah,
like, but there's a lot of things that will kick in at once to keep the boat afloat, or to make things go forward. But maybe
sure.
it is really my problem.
Sorry, what do you mean when you say it might be my problem?
Where it maybe not be my
Oh,
problem,
monopoly. Okay,
It's like
perfect. That makes more
my
sense.
reaction at the moment is like, jump in, got to save it, got to do it. And it's really interesting because I often see founders in my normal job, in my outside of this conversation, rescuing their business. And I say, whoa, that's not, how are you ever going to build that business? Because you're never going to get succession if you don't let them have the time to breathe and let these people feel the problem, but they won't feel it if you don't let the problem continue for long enough.
100%. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But that's kind of the problem. It's like we have a hard time sitting with that discomfort.
In your own.
And I think
Yeah.
you're better at most that not reacting to your triggers, probably because you have such a natural calm disposition. You found very good ways again to cope and work around these things. So what I'm curious now, if we switch gears a little bit, is like who would you be as a leader without all of these people pleasing tendencies?
my first reaction is not me. It's like, that's the first thing, because I do get such good results in every way, like partnerships and friendships and everything. And and I really enjoy work. So I think, it's generally that. Um, if I think the number one thing would take off some stress is, because I think we all focus on, if there's something underperforming or an area that's not working, your brain tends to keep going back to that. And you're not looking at the growing areas, you're looking at the painful area.
So you're
And
using up a lot of mental real estate
yeah,
to navigate these things versus I could just reallocate that to something else.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So I
got it.
think, so I think I don't mind stress. I think it's a natural part of life, and certainly a point of running a business. And I made a choice to do this, so I actually really enjoy it. I do also think that, a really important thing, which is something again I see a lot in technology businesses for sure, as a lot of us come into this as it's a hobby, right? This was never work, and most of your time is this amazing hobby where you get to do so many things. So then when you hit a confrontation, that's not a hobby, and that's where the shift goes. So
Yeah, it's like the price of admission to continue to get paid for doing your hobby, but it's like if you want the hobby to go where it wants to go, it's kind of like
yeah,
that's part of the beast that you are handling and doing. So,
yeah.
and I mean, I know you understand
Yeah,
that, but
there's some people like and if like there's a few founders out there that I'm impressed with, and like probably the ones that really come to mind is Airbnb, because they started really small and they've stayed in the seat all the way through the development of their business, which is huge now. So they've never, they've not got kicked out. They've had to learn things. And I know I've learned, I think with Y Combinator, YC, um, what's interesting there is that I'd listened to some interviews with Sam Altman before he was like the famous Sam Altman, and I believe he ran it, right. And he said the first thing we do with these really young kids is how to deal with conflict. It's the first thing we do. We don't talk to them about technology. The first period is that, because if we can sort that out, everything else goes smoothly.
yeah,
And of course,
100%.
with
Yeah,
my
go
with
ahead.
my with my known problem, that sort of pricks my ear. It's like, oh, that's interesting. It's a really important part to address.
So why do you think it's still important to address for you, right? Because that's essentially what you brought into this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, because as I say, I think it's always going to crop up, and it's sort of masked at the moment because everything's great and it's growing and it's all fun. But I'm happy to admit that's my strength is also my weakness. And how do you keep consistent and authentic when you have the problem and keep your respect as well? So it's a really interesting fine line. You can run these very energetic cultures and teams and everything, but you can't be two-faced, right? And you've got to be consistent. So
So is there a part of you that believes that if you, whatever the wording that lands for you, if you were
yeah,
more intentional, more direct, um, quicker to point things out, was comfortable with holding the mirror to other people, if you were all of those things, is there a part of you that believes, well, you would actually be out of integrity with who you are?
no, I actually think it would be the other way around. I think I'd be more full of integrity because it's telling people exactly what you think on the moment. So there's a
Right.
hesitation, right? So, and I don't know if we've really, really improved in the last couple of years because we implemented EOS. I've been at the entrepreneur operating system and did that from 2018 and different various cases. And now, you use candor, right? You have this meeting. We don't talk about fluffy things. You don't go down Warren holes. You talk about the issues at hand and say, we have a team problem, we have a culture problem, we have, a product problem, whatever it is. Um, I'm not interestingly speaking with you now, I'm wondering whether we do that as well as we did a year ago. So I'll think about that. But the main thing there is that sort of very constructive criticism. It's sort of not directed at the person. It's like just call things out. And I've really enjoyed that because I mean sometimes I've had phone calls afterwards saying, "Are you okay?" Because you got a battering. And I like that because remember, I like this level playing field. So you throw it in and there's no top-down hierarchy. You can make mistakes, so can everyone else. It feels quite safe to be able to do that.
So there's a few things in there that I'm just going to reflect back that I'm really happy to hear that your brain went to where it did, because one of the things I always describe on this podcast when this topic does come up is when people just, okay, tell me, okay, well, what is people pleasing? Like, how do I know it, etc. One of the ways that I usually respond is like, people pleasing is lying.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is exactly what you said. It's like, well, I'm actually more in integrity when I'm not in all of these people pleasing aspects. Why? Because I'm actually saying yes when I mean yes, or I don't
yeah,
say yes when I actually mean no,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't cover
Yeah,
things or have omission of communication. 100% of me, or as close to 100% of me that I can, is actually out on the table. So
yeah,
people are in relationship not with the 60% I feel safe to show, but they are in relationship with the 100% that I
yeah,
express, right? So I'm glad to hear that that's where your mind went to, because really that's the gaps. All of those, leaks that you spoke about with regards to the team efficiencies. We could get things done quicker. We can move through setbacks quicker. We can dial in, like, all, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, those are all little pockets of essentially 60% is being shown. The
yeah,
40% gap is where that next step of leadership isn't happening quickly. That's a lying of the people pleasing pattern. And again, I say this with full respect. I'm not calling you a liar,
yeah.
but it's just that's usually where the conversation goes to. So again, anything that lands for you with that.
Yeah, no, I think having sort of been I had some problems with it a few years ago where that really did cause problems because you just don't deal with it, right? So I do make a stance to deal with it now. And I think as you go through this and you try to fix it, you go through different layers and it's almost like another sort of mountain to climb to where you can get. I like the term North Star all the time. I mean, it's the sort of favorite. So my North Star is like full authenticity, full integrity. And that basically means, you know, you just need to know, right? And I never have a problem with I'm gonna hurt them if I say that or I think that, because it's just most things I want to do are for the good of everyone. They're never a personal thing. Um, so yeah. But I don't think I've really articulated. I've had these thoughts for a long time, but I've never articulated those things around integrity and authenticity, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they're landing for you, because they're definitely important, and I can see how they would be part of the value set that you bring to all of the interactions that you do have. Um, so I know there's like a lot of different directions that we can take this. I think we spent a lot of time kind of mapping out what the pattern looks like for you, what the general associations are for you. I mean, obviously the next step would be to dive into what are the root causes for you, etc. And just because I want to be respectful for your time, like,
Mm.
does this feel complete for you as far as like mapping this out or getting some deeper awareness around it, or is there still something left outstanding for you?
I'm really pleased to sort of come to that, and I think how lucky I am to have this recorded as well, because it's the type of thing that you can sort of really think. And I think genuinely everyone I work with, everything, I don't have to worry about being good. That's not really an issue. Um, but I would take from this if you don't fully express something, and I've known this for a long time, you're not fully your full integrity is not there, and and you know what? If you compare, I don't want to confront this versus I don't want to be in, have integrity, I'm definitely going to fix that because I'd rather not have. Do you see what I mean? It's a value system there that says I'd rather have full integrity than not confront.
Yeah, it's like the desire, the identity piece of I'm somebody who's integrity with my word to the best of my ability is like that has more momentum for you
I
than
have
I have
way
to avoid
more.
this confrontation.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean the
yeah,
value system on that is very high.
yeah. Beautiful. And I'm glad to hear that's the case. And that's I think
Mm,
why your coping skills are as good as they are to navigate around this.
mm.
Because if I'm not saying other people are integrity, but oftentimes the sting of the confrontation and the discomfort that they feel, it just it's higher than the actual desire for integrity. And for you, the fact that it's reversed, I think that's why you have a good job at coping with it, even when it does come up, right?
But,
That's
but,
why
but
it's
there's
not
also but there's even something else, which is we all know when you're in a situation you don't like or want or whatever, then it's a flight or fight sort of scenario. So you need one word to remember. You can't remember a text or a book or a thing. And so when you hit it and you're like, ah, I'm here again, you can literally say, what do I want authenticity and integrity? Yes, okay, I jump in.
perfect. Yeah, and I agree with you. And I know it's just a bit of a tangent as well. What I found with regards to these types of patterns is people that struggle with them, generally it's not even like fight, flight, or freeze. Generally, it's some version of fawn, right? Like they would just acquiesce to the situation
Yeah,
and kind of morph into that 60% while leaving the other 40% unexpressed to
yeah,
just quote unquote keep the peace or navigate around it or kind of play small in some sort of way to avoid the confrontation, avoid expressing themselves. So it's not like they're freezing, they're not running away, they're still here, but they're just fawning, right? Like that's
yeah,
generally how I see the pattern playing out. So I don't know if it applies like it to you, but it's just more of a generality in
yeah.
terms of an observation. Perfect. So, okay, in that case, if all of this does resonate with you, it feels complete. Why don't you just close us off and let everybody know, where to find you, who's the best person to find you, floor is yours for that.
Okay. Yeah, no, so you can find me on Linktree. So the Linktree/Hutton Henry will work and you'll get all of my links and everything in there. Um, what was the other question? Sorry, the
I was
the
just, who's the
links and
best person to find you, where can they find you? All of that, floor is yours for that.
okay. I mean, really, sort of, yeah, I mean, really, I'm happy to chat to anyone in that sort of space of businesses and teams and what have you. Technology, of course. I don't necessarily focus on investors. I really like helping the founders because I'm actually a little bit quiet at the moment because I'm taking this in. It's been really helpful.
Good. Awesome. Well, I'm very happy to hear that. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that your Monday evening
Yeah.
wasn't a total shot in the dark to do this. So I thank you for
Oh, no, it
giving
was
it to
pretty
this,
exciting. No, it was really worth the investment. It's a very small amount of time for quite an insight. So thank you.
Awesome. You're very welcome. So Hutton, thank you very much for being on and for everybody else listening. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks so much. It's been great. Thank you.